The December 10th, 2024 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors is hereby called to order. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. Director Atkins.
We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Stahopes people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community.
Thank you. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Unless you are in uniform, please remove your hat.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very quiet. Okay. Will the secretary please call the roll?
President Mitchell.
Present.
Vice President Herman.
Present.
Director Atkins.
Present.
Director Mason.
Present.
Director Revelinsky.
Present.
Student Representative Kink.
Present.
Student Representative Covarrubias.
Present.
Now we have a special guest. I would like to welcome the Gateway Middle School Choir to perform. Jamie. Come up this behind the owl. So they're facing that way. So that way they're on camera. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the whole time you're in spots. I need to switch through. And everyone shift and turn around and face me.
Stand, come towards us. So you're on this side of the owl.
Okay. Take a couple of steps back.
There you go.
Now we have a nice little one. Okay. So now we can do that. Okay, guys.
If anybody wants to move down, we can move
I'm just
down.
going to stand.
Okay,
I'll go back.
Joan and Nathaniel, scooch down back just a little bit. Here's your note, ready?
Carol bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away. Christmas is here, ding-a-ding-dong, beacons of wood, ding-a-ding-dong, bells of song, ding-a-ding, tall caroling. One seems to hear words of a cheer from everywhere, filling the air. Oh, how they pound, raising the sound, o'er hill and dale, telling his tale. Gaily they ring, while people sing songs of good cheer. Christmas is here. Merry, 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 ding dong. Merry, 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 ding dong. On they sing, dong.
all back in our seats now. Great. Now that moves us on to section 5.0, adoption of the agenda. Dr. Saltzman, were there any changes to the agenda once it was published?
Yes, good evening. Madam Chair, there have been 3 changes to the agenda. Item 12.03, the personnel report. The report was updated. Item 13.01, class of 2025 progress to graduation. The presentation was updated. And item 16.0, capital bond planning committee. The presentation was added.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the meeting agenda being adopted by general consent? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by general consent. So this moves us to section 5.0. My numberings might be off. Yes. Oh, I have it. Okay. Oh. Okay, sorry. Sorry, 6.0, my numbering is off on my thing. The election of the board president. Our next item is election of the board president. The first regular meeting of December is the Board of Directors Annual Reorganization Meeting. I would like to call for nomination for the officer of board president to serve during the coming year. Are there any nominations? Yes.
I'd like to nominate Director Mitchell to serve a second year as board president.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional nominations? Okay, seeing that there are none, let's proceed to a roll call vote. Will the secretary please call for the vote?
President Mitchell,
President Mitchell, or Tracy Mitchell.
Vice President Herman,
Director Mitchell.
Director Atkins,
Director Mitchell.
Director Mason,
Director Mitchell.
Director Revelinsky.
Director Mitchell?
Okay, by unanimous vote, Tracy Mitchell has been elected to the position of board president. Okay, now we have the election of the board vice president. I would like to call for nominations for the office of board vice president to serve during the coming year. Are there any nominations? Yes, Caroline?
I would like to nominate Director Herman to serve as the second year as our vice chair.
Great, thank you. Are there any additional nominations? Seeing none, let's proceed to the roll call vote. Will the secretary please call for the vote?
President Mitchell,
Jen Herman.
Vice President Herman,
Director Herman.
Director Atkins,
Director Herman.
Director Mason,
Director Herman.
Director Revelinsky.
Director Herman?
Okay. By unanimous vote, Director Herman has been elected to the position of board vice president. That moves us on to section 6.03, election of the legislative representative. I would like to call for nominations for the office of legislative representative to serve during the next 2 years. Are there any nominations? Yes, Director Atkins.
I'd like to nominate Director Revelinsky.
Okay. Are there any additional nominations? Seeing none, let's proceed to the roll call vote. Will the secretary please call for the vote?
President Mitchell,
Director Revelinsky.
Vice President Herman,
Director Revelinsky.
Director Atkins,
Director Revelinsky.
Director Mason,
Director Rowlinski.
Director Revelinsky.
Director Revelinsky?
By unanimous vote, Director Revelinsky has been elected to the position of legislative representative. Okay, so that ends our voting. And since the president and the vice president aren't changing, we'll just reorganize for our next meeting seats. Okay, thank you, if that's an agreement. Thank you. So now we'll move on to section, I'm gonna ignore the number, 7.0, the core value champions. Ms. Weinberg.
Good evening, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, Superintendent Saltzman, and student representatives. Thank you for the time tonight to celebrate our November Core Value Champions, where we are highlighting the core value of equity. So each school in our district has chosen a deserving student for this honor. Their names are displayed on our website for recognition, and we are so proud of all of them. However, tonight, we are grateful to have 3 of them in our presence representing our schools. The principals from each of the schools we are representing are here tonight, and we are very excited to have them. Recognizing their students tonight in this order will be Darren Larma from Jackson Elementary, Teresa Campbell from Silver Lake Elementary, and Dr. Wilnick from, Dr. Wilnick Gideon from Eisenhower Middle School. So I'm going to ask that when the principals come up, that they introduce their student, and then I'll have you all step to the side and wait until everyone's done, and then we will get a picture of everyone with the school board all together. And families, that is your opportunity at that time to come forward and snap those cameras as well. So up first, I would like to introduce Darren Larma.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight, I have the distinct honor of recognizing Kellen Theris. He's a fifth grade Jackson Silver, and he exemplifies our core value of equity. Kellen was nominated by his teacher for the incredible efforts he makes in his class to support his classmates' learning and to foster a safe and positive environment for everyone. Whether he's patiently helping a peer understand a challenging concept, or encouraging someone who might be struggling, or just being a kind and inclusive leader, Kellen shows us what it means to lift others up so that everyone can succeed. I just want to share this is a particularly meaningful recognition for me, because Kellen and I have spent a lot of time together over the years working together, and I am extremely proud of the growth that he's made. It's been a pleasure to witness that. He's transformed into a thoughtful, compassionate leader who has a very bright future. We're excited to have him in Everett Public Schools here. So Kellen, we're proud of you. We can't wait to see all that you'll accomplish. Congratulations on being Jackson Elementary's core value champion for equity.
Good evening, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, Dr. Salzman, and student representatives. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ronnie Lofgren. Lonnie Lofgren was nominated unanimously by her team of fifth grade. Ronnie consistently demonstrates a commitment to fostering an inclusive class environment. She actively encourages student agency so that their voices and work are represented. Lastly, she consistently demonstrates a style of leadership that shows thoughtfulness and care for her peers. And I can tell you personally beyond that, that Ronnie over the last 4 years she could have won any one of these months of core values. She really is that student that is there for everyone all the time. Both mom and grandma work at Silver Lake, so she truly is a Silver Lake Mustang. She's there at the beginning of the school day, the end of the day. You can count on Ronnie for anything. So very, very pleased to have her win this award. Congratulations, Ronnie.
All right, I would like to begin by thanking the board for recognizing Chloe Wu as our core values champion. Chloe is a shining example of Eisenhower's Patriot Code to be safe, respectful, and accountable. She also models the moniker, Kids Learn at Ike. As a sixth grader, she's already leading and learning. We are so proud of her. Her teachers describe her as a kind, friendly, and someone who consistently tries her best. They've highlighted how she interacts with others with respect, positivity, and a willingness to share her perspective. Her presence in our school truly makes a difference. Chloe represents the heart of Eisenhower. She not only excels personally, but also lifts those around her, embodying the spirit of equity, inclusion, and community that we value so deeply. We are so proud to have Chloe as part of our Eisenhower family. She is the kind of student who reminds us what we do for our work. Let's give it up for Chloe, the true equity champ in every sense of the word. Thank you. Give it up for Chloe.
Come up here and we'll take a picture.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. How many will get out of your way in just a minute?
Oh, yeah, I will, I promise. few more. Keep smiling. You're doing great. Good. One more. Smile, smile. You good? All right. Thank you all so much.
Okay, I forgot to say when I started this section, this is our favorite part of every one of our meetings. So thank you and congratulations to the students. Our next point of recognition is of the Washington Interscholastic Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame inductee, Ms. Mundell.
I'm going to ask Mr. Hines to come up with me. Good evening, President Mitchell, members of the school board, Superintendent Salzman, and our student representatives. Thank you for having us here tonight. The Washington Interscholastic Basketball Coaches Association recognizes outstanding coaches of Washington State with their annual Hall of Fame induction. Nominees must have at least 25 years of coaching basketball in Washington State, as well as at least 300 wins as a head coach. We are fortunate to have our head boys basketball coach at Jackson High School, Steve Johnson, in this year's Hall of Fame induction class. Coach Johnson joined Jackson High School as head coach in 2002, where he has over 400 wins, made postseason appearances in 2003, and consecutively from 2006 to 2024, except for that 2021 COVID season when there wasn't postseason. He's qualified for state, meaning the top 16 in the state, 11 times, and has trophied at state 4 times. He's won 10 league championships, 7 district championships, earned our own Everett School District Coach of the Year award 3 times. He's earned the Westco Coach of the Year award 6 times. And here with me tonight to speak a little bit more is Jackson High Assistant Principal and Athletic Director Eric Hines to share more about Coach Johnson and his impact at Jackson High.
Thank you, Ms. Mundell. So when in my coaching career in Wesco, I would say between 2005 and 2012, there was no more dominant basketball program than Jackson High School. And that was kind of my first introduction to Steve Johnson as a coach. Upon my arrival to Jackson High School, I got to learn more about Steve Johnson, the educator and the man. His attention to detail and his dedication is only matched by his incredibly inviting and humorous personality. And selfishly, the only guy I can really talk Gonzaga basketball with. He's a leader who is able to demand focus when necessary, but he also has an amazing way to put any situation, even the most challenging, into the right perspective. He's a dedicated family man, an engaging teacher, and a wildly successful coach who I believe receives the ultimate compliment that any coach can get year in and year out, and that is players come back. They want to see him. They want to recognize how much they appreciated their time in the program. So I can think of no better person to be in the Washington State Coaches Hall of Fame than Steve Johnson. He truly epitomizes what it means to be a Timberwolf.
Thank you. Do I say anything? Well, I'm totally blown away, and I have to go coach a game here, so the pressure's on. I mean, but I can't thank you enough for the kind words and taking time out of your schedule tonight and to recognize. And I don't know what to say. I'm totally overwhelmed and very appreciative of being recognized. And thank you very much for the support from the entire district and the school. Obviously, I stand on the shoulders of people who deserve probably a lot more credit than me, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Congratulations. Okay, that moves us on to section 8.0, the superintendent's report. Dr. Saltzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board Directors, and to the public this evening. Before I begin my report, I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday season. Safe holidays to our entire staff of the Everett School District and to our Everett community. Wish everybody a wonderful holiday time and break, and happy, healthy New Year to all. Like to give our community an update on our district's program of Ruler tonight. As we wrap up this month's instructional reviews and we get into the holiday season, we have observed many powerful examples of the Ruler framework in action across our schools, and I'm excited tonight to highlight for you them tonight. For those who may not be familiar, Ruler stands for this: recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. Developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, is an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning to equip our students and staff with emotional intelligence skills needed for success in school and in life. Our commitment as a district to the Ruler framework reflects the connection between academic growth and the social emotional development of our youngsters. Supporting the whole child is essential, and Ruler provides tools to make this work intentional as well as effective. Let me please share with you some ways Ruler is being woven into our daily school experiences. Classroom charters. These are collaborative charters that explain the why behind the rules and explanations in the classrooms. Mood meter. You might have heard your students come home with the word mood meter. This is where students use tools like the mood meter to recognize and label their emotions. For example, in our classrooms, you will find students participating in the mood meter check-ins, where students shared how they may be feeling after recess, for example, creating a safe space for reflection and self-awareness. Another example of the benefits of the mood meter, which you see right here on our screen this evening, takes place recently in one of our special education classrooms. Teachers used 4 cans of Play-Doh in the mood meter, yellow, green, red, and blue, to help a student who was upset over a conflict. The students selected red to express anger, then blue as their emotion shifted to disappointment, and finally green to show why there's calmness and ready to re-engage with their peers. The small but powerful moment illustrates how Ruler strategies can help students navigate through their emotions constructively during the school day. Other ways Ruler works in our classrooms include the meta moment strategy. Students learn to pause and respond thoughtfully in moments of stress or conflict, which helps with self-control and empathy. Blueprints for restorative conversations. These tools guide students in resolving conflicts constructively, both during character studies and real-time interactions. In addition to the classroom activities, schools are beginning to incorporate Ruler into a broader community. For example, we have PTAs that are hosting book studies around Ruler in our district. Schools are organizing Ruler family nights and SEL conversations to guidelines for our families. Staff charters are being created to keep a focus on the emotional climate. There's a counselor-created video series for teachers called Ruler by the Inch to provide ongoing accessibility professional development. Some schools use the Meta Moment lanyards for paraeducators at recess to enforce those regulations strategies. So these efforts align with our broader school improvement goals, which are informed by data from the Panorama SEL surveys, administered twice annually. The survey helps us monitor progress in areas such as teacher-student relationships, sense of belonging, emotional regulation, and self-management. This is now our second year of implementation during the Ruler framework with our students. During the October Learning Improvement Day that we just recently had, teachers and staff participate in professional development to deepen their skills on this. Looking ahead, as we look ahead as a district, we will continue to track the social emotional well-being of our students and look forward to sharing Panorama Stakeholder Survey with our broad community this spring. Thank you for the opportunity for me to share with you one of our amazing programs that we do for our students and our community. I would like to now share, if I may, some celebrations. Recently, with our outstanding board, we attended the WASDA Annual Conference in Spokane, Washington. And kudos to our career and technical education team and board president and vice president, and entire board that was in presence there, because our CTA programs were highlighted to show the great programs that Everett is doing for essential skills for future success and future skills. And looking at the survey that was done, we did quite well, and it was great to get feedback from other districts on the work that we're doing and the learning that took place for them. I'd also like to share some more celebrations tonight. I want to give a shout out to our amazing custodial team at Monroe Elementary School. Our district maintenance department recently did some awards called the Great Dustpan Award, and Jessica and Nanye won their work for their dedication to students, families, and community. They were honored, and it was a really nice event, and thank you, Dr. Meisner, for attending as well. Thank you, Outdoor Schools Washington. Wow, this is a huge thank you tonight. They have donated over $111,000 to support Cedarwood, Forest View, Mill Creek, Tambar Creek, and Woodside Elementary Schools. Thank you to your support for our 5th grade students so they can enjoy outdoor education programs that help them connect with nature, grow academically, and develop leadership skills. We are quite grateful for their commitment to our students and the lasting impact they are making in their lives. And to our core champions, congratulations. Those students are outstanding and well-deserved. Thank you for the opportunity, and again, happy and healthy holiday season.
Thank you. That moves us on to section 9.0, board comments. Student Representative Covarrubias.
So I would start with saying that the legislator meetings were really interesting. It was nice to see from a student point of view what was going on in our district and what was going on with all our schools. And it's also very interesting because I also got to see the difference from when I was in middle school and all those grades from where I am now. And I appreciate that so much. First of all, I want to thank you all for changing the days of winter break, because I like that, and it's also, our term ends before and not after, so we have no tests to go back to this year. And it's also nice because, we get to leave the cold earlier. And Give Back Week was also very good. At least this year, our school's getting bigger, so it's a lot more interesting, and a lot of people get to participate more.
Thank you. Student Representative King.
Just like the choir showed us, the holiday season is right around the corner, and I can't wait for break. We have like a week and a half left. And like Vanessa said, the break is just like very beneficial for students' mental health. I also appreciate the new timing this year. I think it goes a little more into January. And I'm super looking forward to it. Again, my personal favorite break, and the biggest by far. School leadership is doing lots of work right now in terms of food drive and toy drive activities. Our district does an amazing job. All the feeder schools and middle schools and high schools that collect toys and food and give back to the community. It's just such an amazing thing for people. And Cascade in particular, I think, has one of, if not the biggest food drives in the state. They collect so many cans, and I'm really proud of all the work that's gone into that. And last week, I was lucky to meet with State Legislator Robinson to discuss and kind of share student feedback on why our funding for education is so beneficial. Unfortunately, I'd say I was met with a bit of mixed feedback as they're predicting a deficit next year, but I think this only means we should keep fighting and advocating for educational funding.
Thank you. Dr. Ovalinsky?
Sure. Spending time at WASDA was, again, a wonderful experience, spending time with a lot of people that care a lot about kids. My favorite part of WASDA in particular was, similar to Student Representative King, hearing from Senator Wellman. You know, she spoke a lot about what's happening pre-session and what the legislature is expecting to happen, and she had some positive remarks about what it takes to pass a bond, which was very nice to hear. Other than that, I would say prep for this board meeting was a doozy. Personally, 3 financial reports to sink my teeth into. Andy, thank you, wonderful stuff. Also the financial literacy PD grant. I'm a CPA, I love it, thank you, great work. And then finally, I noticed that Heatherwood deleted gray from their school colors. So they're left with black and red, the same colors I had in high school. So just cool to see. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Mason.
Thanks. I also, and I think this will be a bit repetitive, attended the WASDA conference. I believe, well, this is my 11th year, and there wasn't one in 2021 though. But really what I appreciate is there's always something new to learn, even when you've been at it a while. Lots of great breakouts this year, of course. Keynote speaker, Jeff Utek on AI. I found that fascinating. And again, just a lot to continue to learn. I also wanted to update my colleagues here on the dais that the work on the City of Everett Multi-Use Facility Fiscal Advisory Committee has concluded. And the recommendation is being sent to the Everett City Council. They will be taking a look at that in their open public meeting on December 18th, if anyone is interested in attending. Again, I just want to reiterate the focus and the task of the council was to come up with as much money as we possibly could for some kind of renovation of a baseball facility, be it here or a downtown facility. And so we were not involved in actually selecting a location. It was more about the financing. And again, if you're interested in any of the documents, including it's a multi-page recommendation to the City Council, they can all be found on the City of Everett website. And just a reminder, I was not a voting member. I did not approve that document. I was there to offer additional information and support throughout the process, which I found very interesting and fun. And then lastly, attended Silver Fir's IR. We've heard a lot about the IR process in the last couple months, but I just want to say what an amazing high-performing school we have there. It was pretty incredible, and all the graphs go like this up, which was just, I was blown away by their numbers, actually. And the thing that I notice about that school in particular is when I go on to campus, it's always sort of this culture of calm. It's just very orderly, but it doesn't feel forced orderly. It's just always calm and pleasant, and everyone's working together. I just really enjoy being on that campus, and really any campus, just because we don't get to do it very often. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Atkins.
Yeah, I won't be too repetitive about my time at WASDA, though I had a great time at WASDA, and it was my second time, and had lots to learn from the different breakout sessions, and especially the School Directors of Color Caucus. And I also got the opportunity to participate in the meeting with Senator Robinson, and just really was glad to have had the chance to just discuss about the Washington State's upcoming budget deficit and how that relates to education, and what potential opportunities for advocacy there are there. And that's everything I had to report.
Director Herman.
Just to follow up with the meeting with Senator Robinson, I want to thank the students for being there. And we also had representatives from Everett and Cascade, and it means a lot to have you there and speaking out on behalf of education. And I know she appreciated that a lot too. And grateful for her for making the time, as you mentioned, and as we know, the shortfall that the state is expecting is expected to be above $10 billion. And so that it's going to be an interesting legislative session as they figure out how to pass a balanced budget, which is what they are required to do. So grateful for her time there. Back to the WASDA conference, that is always annually our opportunity to connect with other directors and superintendents from around the state, and it's always just enlightening and fulfilling. The theme this year was perspective, and so many of the speakers wove that into what they were talking about, and how they couched some of their messages, which I thought was very well received, especially given the timing. The opportunity that I had, along with all of the breakout sessions this year, I was able to attend the law pre-conference, and that was a packed room with directors and superintendents from around the state. We talked about a number of things, including the Title IX regulations that went into effect in August. And on our board, we adopted those policy changes in October to reflect that. And this is regarding sex discrimination and sex-based harassment. This is just a very changing landscape, and it will continue to be with new administration at the federal level. So it will continue to evolve, again, based on court cases, legislation. Other topics covered were transgender students in athletics, and some proposals that WIAA is considering, rights of employees around free speech and religious expression, parental rights, and Senate Bill 5883 that went into effect in June that we did talk about last year, that puts the burden of proof on school districts for special education due process hearings. So that was a big change that took place. So again, a lot of topics covered, and this is, actually, they do offer this law pre-conference annually with the WASDA conference. Really interesting material because obviously a lot changes every year. So I would recommend that if other directors are interested next year in attending. And I think I'll stop there. Tomorrow I get to do the Sequoia instructional review, so I look forward to being over there. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I want to say that Caroline used the word calm. That's what it's like being at a Jackson basketball game. I mean, it's fierce out there on the court, but Steve Johnson always manages to be calm. So even when you see something the ref might have done as a visitor, you're like, "Ugh," or somebody does something, he's always calm. And I think that helps the team, helps the audience when the coach always seems to have a calm mindset. So Tim and I will be there on a Friday. I also enjoyed WASDA and just want to reinforce, Jen did a little bit, but that's really our time to learn. So as a learning district that we're providing learning, it is a time for us to learn. Superintendent, you already called out the CTE program, but I want to make sure the community knows that when Anthony Anderson was presenting, I have never really heard that many audibles or seen that many nods in a room. He was talking about the Perkins grant, which we'll be approving on the consent agenda, and how even small districts need to go after this money because this is how you help your CTE students. And, you know, he really did reinforce what we can do at this large district and how to translate it down to small districts. And afterwards, he had a lot of small districts coming up and talking to him, and I think talking to a couple other directors and people about rethinking how to do internships when all that's in your community is a landfill and a gas station and a library or post office that's open part-time. And it was, I think everybody enjoyed talking to the community at that. Then the next thing is I was able to go to the AI session where I was able to practice and learn some more, and I still worry about AI because it can't do a poem. Additionally, I learned more about the services available to our Native students. I did go to a Native session with Director Adkins so that I could learn more about really the opportunities to best serve our students. And then lastly, for our students, I was reminded that I have been very remiss in asking for advisory votes this entire school year so far. So there is an opportunity tonight. I apologize. Because there were a lot of students there, but we don't tend to take our students to Spokane. But I did hear about the advisory vote, and I'm like, ooh, forgot. So thank you, and I apologize. So that moves us on to section 10.0, public comment. Dr. Saltzman, are there any requests for public comment tonight?
Madam Chair, there's none at this time.
Thank you. That moves us on to section 11.0, legislative updates. Is that Director Revelinsky or is it Director Herman tonight? What did we decide?
Well, I am the legislative representative, so I will say I don't have much to say other than I appreciate and I am humbled by the honor, and I'd like to thank you for putting your trust in me. I am committed to advocating for students, and I'm excited to get to work.
Thank you. And Director Herman, do you have anything to add as your?
No, I look forward to I look forward to this legislative session, and I want to say a big thank you for taking on the role. I did talk to several other directors at the conference, and we agreed legislative representative is actually the best role on a school board. So thank you for doing that.
No bias at all. All righty, well, that moves us on to the section 12.0, the consent agenda. Dr. Saltzman, have you received any questions about the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received and answered questions regarding the November 21st special board meeting minutes, the financial reports, and the ASB constitutions.
Thank you. First, are there any directors who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Seeing none, now is there any objection to adopting the consent agenda by general consent? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved by general consent. Thank you. That moves us to section 13.0, the strategic progress monitoring. This is for the class of 2025, progress to graduation. Dr. Willard.
Good evening. I'm really glad to be here and get to share this check-in that we get to do every December. So good evening, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, Dr. Saltzman, and student representatives. So this evening, I'll have an opportunity to share with you our current graduation rates, which we submitted in October. Also provide an overview of graduation requirements, describe the progress for our class of 2025, who are in their senior year right now, share an update on the new performance-based pathway option, and describe systems of support for graduation. So with that, this work is nested in the areas around reducing gaps and ensuring all students are ready for college and career and life. So I shared that in October, we submitted our graduation rates. We have not seen Washington State share the overall rates for the state, but right now we can speak to our own. So with that, we see increases in our 4-year and our 5-year rates. That's on the top part of the chart. So our 4-year rates went from 94.8%. They went up 4% to 95.2%. Those are students. Also, our 5-year rates also increased from the 94.5% you see to 95.8%. Again, closing gaps, getting closer to 100%, ensuring every student has an opportunity to graduate. Our graduation requirements have been fairly steady for the last few years. So this is just a reminder of information that we already have. There's 3 key components when it comes to graduating students. Our high school and beyond plan, which is really students putting together what they believe might be a future option. Many steps related to that they start in 6th grade. Resumes, they actually put together a plan, career interest profilers, they do they do mock interviews. There's many other pieces to this. They complete their applications when they get to the college and career readiness seminar in senior year. Then probably the part that most everybody knows the best is that credits. When we talk about graduating students, a lot of the work is around credits. So with that, students are required to earn 24 credits. 17 of those are in core requirement areas, and then there's areas for flexibility and electives. And one of those electives is the College and Career Readiness Seminar. Again, that's a district requirement, and that too is part of that high school and beyond plan culmination. And then finally, our graduation pathway options. So students wrap up their experience with us by completing one of the many options that I'll describe later in the presentation. This includes testing. Now we actually have a portfolio option, but there's many other options as well. This flyer really highlights some of those areas that are about those credits, because they're very detailed. And like any high school student or their parent might recognize, there's a lot to learn about the ins and outs. You can have course equivalencies, all sorts of choices when it comes to going to high school across all of our schools, including Sequoia. When we talk about how we go about graduating students, it is also a learning experience. So of course our students are learning, but we learn as an organization as well. administrators, both at the schools and centrally, our success coordinators, our counselors are all engaged in focusing on ensuring all of our students graduate on time. And we largely have a pattern that goes on throughout the year. So we start the year by really thinking about what worked the previous year. Very reflective. We also try to figure out where students are. Every year it's different. We think we've got it mastered. We have to think through it again. We have to get better at things that we learned about the year before. We find out that things we saw before still need to be worked out a different way because that's what each new year brings. So we start the year that way. And then about now, we're talking about not just seniors, we start talking really more closely around our students who are in 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. Looking at those transcripts up close, making sure we understand where they are and planning out what will happen next for them as well. We don't wait till senior year for sure, but we make sure we start with seniors because we need them to be finished at the end of the year. We want them to be there. Then we get to overcoming barriers. This is really what happens at the beginning of second semester. We have first semester grades, those credits again, we look at them, all the requirement areas. And again, we're learning. We're thinking about what did we find out in first semester about students? Where are they struggling? Where are things working? That's part of even the work I get to share tonight is that progress that we look at on an ongoing basis. And then the end of the year, talking about May, June, and into the summer, we're really graduating students, finalizing requirements, and then if students have not met that culminating piece of graduating, we're walking side by side with students, making sure that they have every opportunity to graduate during the summer. And that means sitting with students, working with them on individual requirements. Sometimes they go to summer school. Some of our graduates from some of our other programs that we have in our district, like Everett Re-Engagement Academy, that is Graduation Alliance and U3, those students become a real focus, finishing up until our August graduation. And honestly, if students don't finish by then, we are still working with them. As long as it takes, if it's another year or whatever, we're with them the whole way. So back to the credits, because that is always a place to know whether we're on track. It's a good measure. And so we use terms like red, yellow, and green. Excuse me, like our stoplight there. So when we talk about students who are in the red, we are only talking about credits. There may be other things that are missing. It may not be always in the right buckets, but we're talking about overall numbers of credits. And so red means that they are more than a year behind in terms of their credits. Yellow means they're about a year. And then green means they're on track. They have the right number of credits for being at their grade level. And right now, for 9th graders, they don't need to have any, right? Because they didn't, but we have kids coming in with credits from middle school, which is a great segue to what we do. So credits don't just start. The opportunity for those doesn't just start in high school. It actually starts before that. There's many opportunities for students to walk into high school with credits. Many of them come in about average 2 credits when they enter high school, some more. And that's largely because we have grown programs through our middle school redesign and the many years that we've been doing this work. You can see here some of our classes that have been traditional high school classes like algebra, that we call algebraic concepts, or geometry and application, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice there. Washington State history, which we've had for a very long time, but we also added, over the last 2 years, we've added many other CTE offerings. We were hearing about CTE. So lots of opportunities for credits during high school, and I should highlight also Spanish, which has been a really important piece too. So other things are listed there that have been ongoing. Another opportunity is really our world language proficiency assessment. Students who come to us some kind of language ability to speak, read, write about it. They take tests. There's a whole assortment of tests depending upon the language that they're trying to test for, and they can earn up to 4 high school credits in any language. And that means that a student who may be multilingual could earn credits in multiple languages. So they could come into high school having many credits in that area. And then you may have heard me describe in the past, but this has been an important piece. This is the 3rd year in our 9th grade success teams. So we have been working with teams of teachers at Cascade High School and Everett High School, and Jackson also sort of piggybacks on the work that we do because these two were funded through a state grant. And it follows up on the progress of students. Remember, I mentioned ninth grade students don't really have credits. They have some from middle school maybe, because they do come with that. But we are tracking their grades right now. So if students are falling behind, if they have Fs, Us, NCs, different ways we indicate failure in the moment, we are following up with them. We're intervening. We have 6-week cycles. And then we do a lot of celebrations to make sure that we know students are meeting their benchmarks. We're seeing things like a success drive at Cascade High School. We see e-tickets where they're giving celebrations at Everett High School. So lots of moments for students to feel rewarded for the work that they're doing and to feel that they belong when they enter high school. And then finally, some of the things that we do in middle school line up for students having credits in high school, which is doing a lot of planning. Middle school is about planning, opportunities for exploration and planning. So the high school and beyond plan, the lessons are lined up so students can think about their next steps, and that means course taking as well. So with that, I'm going to share a few slides that really describe our status in terms of our credits towards graduation. This is our current senior class, the class of 2025. What you'll notice here is we see a large green block. About 88% of students in the senior class actually are on track in terms of the number of credits. And then much smaller numbers are a year behind and more than a year behind, so that's yellow and red. And those numbers are shrinking, and our number of students on track has gone up by about 2% compared to last year for the class of 2024 when this presentation was given about that class. So all of the arrows are going to indicate a comparison to last year's report for the class of 2024. So it gives us a point in time for a similar senior class, and I can share some of the pieces behind that as well. So with that, we saw increases also around each of our program areas for students who are multilingual, students who qualify for free and reduced meals, and students with disabilities. We saw a large gain. So credits are being earned. There's many ways for students to get there. And this is all planning, adults working with students, by the way. And so with that, we also saw increases across the board when we talk about race and ethnicity. I want you to notice that for our Black and African American students, it's not marked because it's a very small number of students. So because the suppression rules can't really show that, but it's very similar to what it was within a few students. So that's why that one is not marked that way. But we saw increases when it comes to that data as well. Back to our graduation pathway options, we are actually very fortunate in our district, given all of the work that's taken place and all of the organizational pieces, that we offer all of the possible graduation pathway options available. So with that, we have state assessments. The Smarter Balanced is the one that we'll recognize the most, and that would be for math and for English language arts. We also have many dual credit options. That's CTE dual credit, and of course, college and the high school. We have a really robust program that we continue to grow. Also, our AP courses and exams is another option for students to meet this requirement. Also, we provide an in the school day opportunity for the SAT in March. This is another way that students are actually meeting both their math and their ELA graduation pathways. Another option that we have really developed that isn't always widespread is we offer Bridge to College Math, which is a fourth-year math for students in high school, and it allows them to be placed at the college level when they pass that in the high school. But we also have the opportunity to use transition courses that we have local agreements with our local colleges, Everett Community College in particular. So any of the courses that would allow a student to be placed at the college level, if they were to have passed at a certain level, there's different requirements for each area, for different math courses, for English language arts overall, allows a student to be placed at the college level when they go on to college, will allow us to mark the student as meeting those graduation pathways for math specifically, or ELA. So there's different requirements in those areas. Then I've been sharing, and I'll share a little bit more tonight, that we have the performance-based option also. So we have a portfolio that we grew in the spring that we've been rolling out this year. So that's been really exciting. It's an addition mostly to our college and career readiness seminar and some of the equivalencies, but this is another great option also because students get an opportunity to do some research that I'll get to share. We also offer the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Very small number of students complete that, but we do have a very sizable and very robust CTE program, which allows students to meet their pathways in both math and English language arts. So with that, we try our best to communicate. As you can tell, even around credits where we have flyers, we're always trying to communicate, but it is very detailed when it comes to all the different ways that students can possibly graduate and also spend time exploring their own interests, which is also key. So these documents, I know they're kind of small, are documents that we keep in our high school and our middle school course catalogs. We share them during different presentations with students, during our high school and beyond plan lessons that counselors deliver with students. These are all components of that work. In terms of the different graduation pathway options, before I go into this, I want to clear up a few things. This is our students who are in the class of 2025. They could have met either the ELA or math or both in any of these areas. So this is going to be multiple students showing up in some of all the categories. Clearly, our state assessments overall are not being passed at 75%, but when you look at our seniors, 75% of them have met in either math or ELA or both. So this is still a primary driver for how students meet this requirement because they are meeting it this way. The SAT comes in a close second, really. Students are meeting it that way, so this has been a great opportunity for our students to meet this requirement. Then close behind it, CTE pathway, dual credit, that's the CTE, dual credit, and also college and the high school, and our AP courses and AP exams. ASVAB has been, for many years, a very small way in which students actually meet it. But right now, students usually go about taking that closer to the end of the year when they may be more interested in the military and make that choice. And then you'll see some 0%, but it's not an indicator of where students will be at the end of the year. So for transition courses, most of those cannot be met until the end of senior year. So when I return in June and we look at the same data, you will see that this will change. This also includes bridge to college math. It can't be marked met until students complete the year, and this is a senior year class. So again, you will see that data show up there. The other piece is the performance-based, or our portfolio that we talk about. This can't be completed yet because it's included in a class that's happening right now for the very first time. So at the end of the semester, and certainly in June when this presentation, the update for the seniors when they graduate, we'll share what our final % of students who completed it through that. I want to note that for all of the areas where there's higher percentages from state assessments down to AP courses and exams, all of them had gone up about 2 to 3% in each of those areas. The one standout is really AP courses and exams. It went up 15% from last year, from this very same presentation a year ago. Part of the reason behind that is because the State Board of Education added some options for English language arts. They added to qualifying courses AP Human Geography. They added AP Seminar, which is one of our most highly participated courses, and they also included AP Research. So those really changed our numbers in that area. So with that, let's take a closer look at the status of graduation pathways. We're seeing increases overall. So students who have met in both math and ELA has gone up about 10% from last year. And that means our numbers of students who have only met one or none is actually declining, and you'll see for each of the areas. So with that, for our ML students, for our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, they've increased by 5% from the class before of seniors. And then our students with disabilities has increased 11%. And a lot of that is around planning, organizing what students are going to take to make sure that they can meet the different requirements and they have opportunities to take, in this case, a lot of CTE classes, and making sure they have options to take any of the other options as well. Word option there, I used a lot. And then when we look at race and ethnicity, we also see huge increases. For our Asian students, our African-American students, there was a larger increase, so I could share that number. And then for our Hispanic students, it was fairly level. There was a slight increase, but it was pretty much steady from last year. And then another large increase for our students who are 2 or more races, and our students who identify as white. So with that, I want to highlight our performance-based pathway option. This is an option that is a portfolio that students put together. It's guided with their teacher with specific materials. We've actually built a OneNote that has and hosts all of the materials that students need in order to complete their portfolio. In there are lessons. In English language arts, what you would see is there's career research. What do you want to do? Let's start with that. Mapping all the way from where you want to go, and we're going to backward map. So all of this happens in that way. What kind of education and training would support those ideas? What kind of financial aid might you need in order to be able to access the training, the education, and then go on to that career? And then what does it mean to seek employment in that area? And then for the math pathway, it's a financial literacy unit. Spending and saving, what does it mean? It's connected to the research they did around what their future path will be, credit and debt, and investing. And there's lessons on all of these. Students engage in research. The OneNote tool allows it to be translated in many languages. It also has many accessibility tools so students can read it more easily or listen to the text on the page as well. So it just allows for a whole process, and then students get to take it in different directions depending upon what they're interested in. So they show what they've learned, and this allows them to meet that graduation requirement. So another key piece of graduating students is really preventing and re-engaging dropouts. So we do a lot of work to make sure that students have every opportunity to earn the credits and meet the other requirements. But when students do not attend or that they do drop out, we put a lot of effort into making sure that every student is re-engaged, that we find another opportunity for them so that they can stay in school, re-engage in school, even if it's not with us, making sure that there's a right fit so that there's a path forward. A lot of this is progress monitoring, daily reports, weekly reports that come out each week that we review, and monthly reports that the schools also work on. We work together, following up on students with phone calls, emails, text messages, home visits, meetings in person that talk about what would be a really good choice for moving forward. We have some great programs in our district. We have a school called Everett Re-Engagement Academy, which is focused on entirely re-engaging our dropouts or students who are far behind in credits. We're served in those programs through Graduation Alliance, which is an outside provider. And then also Everett Community College, which provides a U3 in-person program. And students can also have college options there, earn their AA, or get some other credentials and certificate programs that may not be offered through our regular high school diploma program through Graduation Alliance. We also offer Sequoia High School for many students. That's a great smaller fit for many of our students who just need a different place to really get started. Really warm environment. So being ahead, the early identification of dropouts, looking at attendance really closely because that is the pattern in which we follow up with students, and then always following up. So each year I have an opportunity to share a point in time when we talk about dropouts. There's 3 categories in which we share data with the state, what types of dropouts we might have. One is that if students have a GED, yes, this is a great way to move forward. Certainly many students will get GEDs, but in terms of our data and graduation rates, it actually is counted as a dropout because they need to have earned a high school diploma. Right now we have no students who are in that category. Students who report a reason for dropping out, well, many times they don't upon their initial dropping out. They don't tell us we're dropping out. They slowly stop coming is what the usual pattern is. So most of our students fit that last category of students we're not sure for the reason, although many times we find out shortly after. It's just in part of the reporting. So for this time of year, it was 29 students. And actually, I want to tell you, because we're very exact, I always want to give the same every week. So it was 29, but the next week was 24. So as you can tell, every day, every week, it's always a little different. And this is work we do every day, every week, all year long, to make sure students have options for graduating. So lots of systems of support. When we talk about making sure that students are on track for graduation, making sure that they have an opportunity to be re-engaged. So we facilitate credit checks, making sure students have met all of their requirements in all of the required areas. Very intricate. Graduation pathways, lots of options that we have here, making sure that students have a path forward. We monitor attendance ahead of them dropping out and follow up on students. We implement strategies around attendance, robust pieces that are taking place at the schools with individual students. We have home visits. We have personalized planning meetings. So once we do talk to a family, talking about what would work for them or what would help them earn the credit so they can stay on track. We try to engage in dropout exit plans. If they've left us, we want to find out why. And then we want to find out what would work best for them. A lot of real-time data we engage in. We have lots of options around credits that I couldn't go through in this presentation because there's so many of them. Lots of flexible options. Students can meet requirements in multiple areas by course equivalencies. CTE pathways meet multiple requirements for many students. We have options during the day that meet that, but then we have ways to recover credit, competency-based credit, summer school, our Saturday programs. All of those help students stay on track. So another piece is really that anytime a student doesn't feel like they're making progress, we engage in transition planning, making sure there's a white glove handoff between programs, making sure that students know that we're there for them. If they choose to come back to a program or school, we're going to be there to receive them. And then finally, making sure each student has a plan for graduation. So with that, our next steps, always continuing the ongoing monitoring of student progress to graduation, daily, weekly, monthly, all the time. And then a special focus on the progress of completion of graduation pathways. There's just so many choices and making sure students are on track. We continue to implement and support our performance-based pathway that we're implementing in College and Career Readiness Seminar, making tweaks, making sure it's ready for second semester. We've been engaged in that work. And then always engaging in student-by-student support to meet the needs of individual students. We provide outreach to students who are not attending school or who have dropped out. And then probably the key to any of this work is really that we build relationships with students. We understand them, we spend time listening, understanding what they would need so that they're on track for what they want to do next. So with that, I want to thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead, please.
Dr. Rilla, thank you. I always appreciate your presentations and all the work that's done to get the students to the finish line of graduation. I was thinking of your graphs on the pathways not met, and I was thinking maybe a better title would be Pathways Not Met Yet.
It's true for most of those charts. They will get there.
Yeah, so
I like your title, though, a lot.
I'm really interested in the performance-based pathway and how that's gonna look going forward. Students need to basically, right at the beginning of the College and Career Readiness Seminar, they have to sort of declare that they would be going for that, right? And that would be set up for them for this semester.
We have integrated it completely in the class. So all students who are in that class participate in it, even if they met another pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay,
they are
so
all
that
working
is-
on it. And then in there, they essentially do research in 3 areas, and that allows them to engage in the different units that go on, even with math, with the financial literacy.
Okay.
So even if they've completed their graduation pathway 1, 2, 3 times, because some of the students do, they are still going to engage in that because it's a pivotal piece of the class.
That's fantastic. So it's
Yeah.
really revamped that,
Yes.
that course, probably to be more robust in what they've already been doing parts of. Great to
Exactly.
hear.
Yeah.
If you could go back to slide 21 on the dropouts, you had mentioned that students don't report the reason, but you may find out later on.
Yes.
Even anecdotally, and I love the fact that we are talking about individual students there. What are some of the reasons?
Many of the reasons tend to be around social anxiety.
Okay.
Another reason we hear commonly is, I need to work. I can't go to school and work. I can't finish and work. So in that case, we find other options. Sometimes they're a young family in some way. And so we have different options that can meet their needs. Usually those are the 3 top reasons, but social anxiety or anxiety about school in different ways. And that may not just be about the social aspects, it may be about academics. that they didn't feel confident, or they didn't feel that they were supported, or weren't confident that they would ever finish. And so they've stepped away. So many of those pieces show up in different ways. That one's much more complicated than a few words.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate this presentation too, because I appreciate the recognition of yet, because I do look at some of the numbers and I'm like, it is only October. And I know everybody in those high schools is working so hard that this is a very different picture in the spring. So
Yes.
just thank you, and everybody, all the paras and all the teachers and staff that work on these, for these kids.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So now I'll move on to section 14.0, information discussion, fourth quarter and September, October financial updates. Ms. Tress.
Thank you, Board of Directors, student representatives, Dr. Saltzman, President Mitchell. Tonight, I will be discussing the fourth quarter financial report and the fourth quarter financial report for the 23-24 fiscal year, and the September and October financial information for the current year for the 24-25 fiscal year. I just want to highlight why we report all of this information at one time. It's really a timing of when we're required to finalize all of our state reporting for the 23-24 fiscal year. The OSPI approves that information on November 14th. So based on timing of when we have board meetings is when we can finalize our fourth quarter financial information for the 23-24 fiscal year, provide you the beginning fund balance for the next fiscal year. Again, as I mentioned, we'll review the final fourth quarter financial report. A preliminary report was provided on the October 22nd regular board meeting, and there have been no significant changes from that report as well. In addition, I will be providing information on the general fund, the district's main operating fund, the capital projects fund, the debt service fund, and the associated student body fund, and the transportation vehicle fund, and that financial information for September, October of the 24-25 fiscal year. We'll start by wrapping up last year, the 23-24 fiscal year, and start by discussing the district's general fund. The board and community heard the preliminary information on October 22nd, regular board meeting, and there again have been no major changes since that report was presented. Fund balance increased by $5.6 million, and that was driven by increased enrollment, increase in allocations to our material supplies and operating costs, and our classified staffing allocation. Those outcomes were from the 2024 legislative session, an increase in investment income, lower staffing costs due to vacancies and staffing alignments during our enrollment process, increase, and an overall increase beginning fund balance. The district's ending fund balance was 10% of total expenditures, above the board-approved minimum fund balance of 5%, and the district's unassigned fund balance was 7.2% of expenditures, above the board-approved policy of 2.5%. The state also requires districts to separate out and report their funding by state and federal funding and local and levy funding. And both of these resources, the revenues are exceeding the expenditures as we move forward. In our local levy funding resources, this does also include our early learning programs, as well as our investment income and other funds coming from our local and community resources. Our state and federal funding include our categorical programs, like our CTE programs or our multi-learner programs, as well as our special education programs. Looking at the district's capital projects fund, which supports building, constructions, and modernizations, and technology improvements. We had minor changes from the preliminary financial report presented in October. Major projects included one-to-one student devices, device lifecycle management, Clean Building Acts upgrades, roofing projects, and portable moves. I also want to highlight, as I mentioned in October, the budgeted expenditures to the actual expenditures for the capital projects do fluctuate by project timelines. Often we'll have projects complete early or complete later in the next fiscal year, depending on project plans so that will have some fluctuation overall. And then we look at total expenditures. In addition, the fund balance for the capital projects fund needs to have sufficient fund balance to support some of our bigger projects that are happening in the next fiscal year, as we have two major large replacements of our elementary schools, one being Jackson Elementary School, which we are working on for the next fiscal year. Looking at the district's debt service fund, which supports supports principal and interest from our outstanding bonds. This fund balance has sufficient funds to support its outstanding principal and interest payment, as well as its multi-year payment schedule. The ending fund balance is anticipated to decline as bonds are continued to pay off, as we currently don't have any voter-approved bonds. As a whole, the district's outstanding bond balance is about $71.4 million. Looking to the district's ASB or Associated Student Body Fund, there was no changes to the presentation that was provided in October. And again, the fund balance and the revenues and expenditures support student activities. What I want to highlight here is that our revenues and expenditures were almost aligned one-to-one. We really do try to encourage our students to utilize the funding revenues, the revenues that they earn in that fiscal year in the year that they earn those dollars. And again, we'll look at the Transportation Vehicle Fund, and this fund supports vehicle or bus purchases that the districts own. I want to highlight that we did not purchase any buses last year. However, we did have buses on order in the beginning of January. I anticipated to receive them in August. However, due to delays, we actually are not going to receive them until January of 2025. And so we have funds to support that and a fund expenditure capacity to support the purchase of those buses for the next fiscal year. I also want to highlight that all of our funding related to transportation is recorded in our general fund as the district uses a busing service provider to support our transportation programs. Moving on to this fiscal year, the 24-25 fiscal year, I'll begin discussing the district's overall enrollment, and this enrollment drives the general fund revenues. Enrollment drives over 60% of those general fund revenues. And this enrollment here is the actual annual average student FTE, which is the funding calculated model that the state provides the funding over. When you hear us typically talk about enrollment, you hear us typically talk about head count, which is the total number of students counted, and that's typically on October. And what the great highlight for this fiscal year is that head count was approximately 80 higher than our budgeted head count overall, which will impact our calculated funding source, and that's what will represent in the monthly FTE, or student enrollment FTE in this graph over the years. And again, you can see that in the current year, our calculated FTE is higher than prior years, so it's seeing that growth in our enrollment. So that enrollment update has been updated in our overall projected revenues. We've also updated enrollment for our special education based on our actuals, as well as our enrollment for our multi-learner programs and our CTE programs. The graph here represents the monthly revenue trends. And as you can see for the 24-25 fiscal year, those trends are following typical patterns. as a whole. The updates to projections as well also include most of our finalized state and federal grants awards. We budget an amount during the budgeting process, and during the first quarter of the year, most of those get finalized. In addition, our actual revenues are based on our budgeted enrollment, and we will see a true up in January when the state starts reflecting our actual revenues in the January timeframe. Moving on to looking at the general fund expenditures, we are projecting expenditures to be within board-approved appropriations. It is projected lower than our overall budget, but we anticipate our material supplies and operating costs to be higher than budget, which is offset by our staffing costs. And that's really driven in our special education programs. We budget to include the staff within our enrollment, however, often based on when we can hire staff, we need to utilize service contracts, and so we see the service contracts as being higher than our budget, offset by that staffing cost needs. When we look at the monthly trends for our total expenditures, I do want to say they fluctuate month over month, and that's really driven by the opportunities that we have to process our vendor payments. We pay them weekly, and so depending on the month, we may have 4 weeks or 5 weeks for that processing, so you'll see inconsistency in those monthly trends. But overall, this is pretty typical from where we're seeing at that. There were some timing issues last year with a shorter November, and some of those expenditures were caught up in December because of when the holiday timing happened, as well as why you're seeing the downward trend in November for the 23-24 fiscal year. So what does that mean overall for our total projecting ending fund balance? We anticipate our ending fund balance to be higher than our budget, really driven by a slightly higher beginning fund balance, less than 0.25% overall, and then a higher the budgeted enrollment, and then staffing cost alignment in our eight-day count process. Our budgeted fund balance was 7.5%, so we're seeing that 8.4 in the projection. And as you can see, the graph here represents the monthly actual fund balance trend, and they're following the typical pattern. Often we'll see an October increase, and that's driven by our local levy collections. And so the majority of our levies are collected in October and the April timeframe. I also want to provide an updated outlook and projections of our overall projections based on what we provided in the budget to where we're at currently now. And there have been some changes in projections driven to enrollment, and also driven in our IPD, or the implicit price deflator, which is a cost of living factor. So last year when we were developing the budget, the state was setting it at 1.9% of an IPD, and as we've gone throughout the year, we're starting to see an anticipated higher increase in IPD of 2.6% overall. This does reflect enrollment changes for the current fiscal year, so for the 24-25 fiscal year. What this doesn't reflect is updated enrollment projections for the future years. We're still developing those, so those enrollment projections are the same from the prior year. I also want to highlight we are planning a transition process around changes to what we're required to do for our transportation programs. The state during the 2024 legislative session requires districts to provide similar same benefits to our transportation service providers when you renegotiate your contracts. And so as we were looking at the cost and planning for that, one of the things we're trying to mitigate is the overall impact in the year is apply the cost over 2 years, so we can get additional funding in the prior and the next year, because the state currently funds our transportation funding based on prior year expenditures to help mitigate some of those processes. But with all of those changes, I do anticipate we will need reduction in future years. I just want to highlight that change in IPD cost us about $1.8 million above funding, so that includes the additional funding over the next 3 years with that shift in that IPD. And so that's one of the drivers overall in that changing, and so fluctuating IPD can impact what that looks like in future years. And that also assumes no changes to levy capacity or state funding model as well. So looking towards the four other comprehensive funds, I'll start with the district's capital projects fund. And we've seen a shift in how the fund balance trend overall aligns historically, where we're starting to see a pattern that mirrors the general fund due to how we're currently receiving funding sources, and primarily driven by local levies. And so we'll see an increase in October, and we'll see an increase in April based on those levy collections. Again, we ensure that we have enough fund balance to support the projects within the levy, the capital levy plan, and we are starting a lot of the major work for the Jackson Elementary. And so we'll see that fund balance fluctuate based on the anticipated multi-year project plan for the capital projects fund. Looking at the debt service fund, again, as I mentioned in the prior for last year's information, we do have sufficient fund balance to support the outstanding principal interest for this fund. We have seen a decline in the fund balance driven by a decline in our overall outstanding bond balance. As we look to the district's associated student body fund, you can see this is a fund balance trend, a monthly fund balance trend, and we see typical trends for the associated student body funds where we see the fund balance increase in the fall and decline towards the end of the year. And that's driven by the fact that the students do a lot of their fundraising at the beginning of the year to support their year's activity needs. Those fundraisers include ASB card sales, yearbook sales, and other major fundraisers to help support them throughout the year overall. And looking at the transportation vehicle fund, the fund balance is approximately $465,000 right now. We do anticipate state revenues of about $397,000, and we do currently have 2 buses on order, and we anticipate them to be here in that January of 2025 timeframe. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments? Director Ovalinsky.
And Andy, I have one question for you. It'll take a little context. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but I loved getting this. I thought this was fantastic. In the center, however, it says that student enrollment was 20,437. Whereas your report, it never gets above 20,000. Could you explain the difference there, please?
Yeah, great question. So the difference really is driven by our preschool enrollment and our students who are full-time running start. So that number incorporates every student being served that live in this district. And so when we look at the annual average student FTE, it is based on our general ed basic education funding model, and that's what that enrollment looks at. And then when we talk about headcount in our budgeting process, we don't include the preschool enrollment, because it's really that head count that we focus on in October is to drive our total annual average calculation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Director Herman.
I do have a few. And for full-time running start, we do get to count them as 0.2 FTE, correct?
That's actually funded directly through to the full-time running start. It's funded directly to the school itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking how there's still administrative costs and there's still
Yeah, we
our
get to
students.
add. We actually get more than 1.0 FTE for the partials is the difference there around that, yeah.
So I was thinking also enrollment running start that's picking up.
Yes, we are seeing actually a pickup in our running start enrollment in general.
Yeah. The staffing alignment during the first 8 days of school, I just wanted to draw that out because if I'm thinking about that correctly, that was really, this year, staff didn't have to, it was through preparation that staff didn't have to be moved, and there's a lot that went into that. Can you just speak to that?
Yeah, so this is an annual process that we have a really great procedures around and practices around. And really, one of those pieces is we're working with the schools to, as they're seeing student register, to say, okay, are we, do we need to hold on hiring that staff member because are we seeing those students, or do we need to hire a staff member because we're seeing that registration come in? And so that this year it's for a district this large to not have any teacher move building is pretty unusual as a whole. And in addition to that, we also didn't use all of our staffing allocation as well. We actually we'll see that in our expenditure cost, have saved on two teacher staffing in our budget as well, based on just where the students land and not having to split the classes or adding another teacher, because sometimes kids don't come in seats the right way, so that it doesn't make sense to have that many kids in that classroom as a whole. So that's two of the things that came out of our staff process. And it's really driven by the whole district. It starts with our principals, our regionals, and with our HR team as well.
Yeah, that was well done.
Just point of privilege. We start that literally when we come back from break in end of July, early August, with our regionals, our HR department, like Andy said, in budget. But we start in August right away, looking at what's our enrollment, looking at what's our registration. So by the time you get to September, it's not chaotic in the buildings. Does that make sense? So it is a process. It usually takes a good 6 weeks from day one we arrive back.
Yeah, I think it showed in the smooth start to this year too. One final question, IPD, and it just was solidified at the 2.57, but the 1.9 was carryover from last year. We, for state allocation, correct me, and this is a check for understanding moment, that will be, state allocation will include that for our certificated staff, I believe. But of course, when we hire more or hire more in number or pay more.
So the IPD factor is reflected on the staff so the funding allocation for certificated and classified staff.
It includes
So
both.
it increases both of those per FTE
Okay.
allocations within that, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and so our excess, that what we are covering from local funds is really the percentage on top of.
So, and what that means for the district, and it's over 3 years, it's about $1.8 million over the next 3 years. So it's about $600,000 annually for that change. Above, if we maintain current level of staffing and no enrollment changes. I was comparing it to apples, and there's no change to the enrollment factor. So, so it's so that's the above the funding we get based on our current staffing levels.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? I just have, I guess, a compliment, because coming out of WASDA, just the work you and the team have been doing, listening to conversations, and I might not be saying this right, but some of the districts were talking about or asking questions about what to do when they have bills due and levies haven't come in yet or state funding hasn't come in yet. And, probably smaller districts or whatnot, but just really thankful that hasn't been a conversation here. That the way you manage it and the way we manage it, you're not having to come to the board, because there were questions about loans and how do districts get loans and state laws around loans. So it was just, there are districts out there really struggling. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank Dr. Saltzman and really the entire district, because it is a process, and then we do have a process to as getting us all involved in our budget development.
Great, well, thank you so much. That moves us on to section 15.0, unfinished business, and there's none for this meeting. Then we move on to section 16.0, the approval of resolution 1317, formation and instructions and guiding principles for capital bond planning committee. Mr. Fleckenstein.
That took a little while.
That's not what you want, though.
Oh, not the right one. Which one is, where are you? Okay, is that one it?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had the same cover screen, I think.
My golly, yeah. All right, well, good evening, President Mitchell, Board of Directors, Superintendent Saltzman, and student representatives. This evening, I present to you the proposal for developing a capital bond planning committee. Tonight, this presentation is a culmination or outcome of the board's discussions on a future capital measure that have occurred since its August summer retreat, where initial information around the potential around a future capital measure was presented. Specifically, the outcome of the meeting, of those meetings, is the establishment, the board's desire to establish a committee to develop a capital bond proposal and recommendation that would come back to the board for Dr. Saltzman's presentation on June 24th, 2025, which is the last regular meeting in June. Our objective for tonight's meeting, once we've concluded the presentation, is that the board were to approve Resolution 1317 regarding the formation, instructions, and guiding principles for a capital planning committee. When we think about the information that was presented in August and has been a focus of conversation, is the current context within the school district relative to three major variables. The first being enrollment, the second is its capacity or lack thereof within the district, and then our aging facilities and just the routine maintenance that we have to do to keep our facilities in good condition. That would be replacing roofs, HVAC systems, all the things that we've become familiar with in our own homes. Within the resolution, and just for the board and for the public, the information presented tonight, a lot of this information is contained within the resolution itself. But I've highlighted a lot of that within the presentation just for conversation point. The first here, when we look at enrollment, and as Ms. Tress talked about earlier today, our enrollment has increased the last 2 years, and in the future, we project it to continue to increase. Specifically, we expect increases and project increases for all three grade levels across the district over the next 9 years. The district's elementary enrollment is projected to exceed its permanent building capacity by 1,429 students. That is about 2.5 elementary schools worth of children, and necessitates about 119 portables by the end of 2023. The third context that's presented around capacity is that 13 of the district's 18 elementary schools are currently over their permanent building capacity. 100 portables exist currently on site at our elementary schools alone, out of the 143 total within the district. And then finally, the district's facilities are aging and in need of replacement, modernization, or upgrades to accommodate educational programs and safety features. When we look at the Everett School District's boundaries projection, and this is population projections within our boundaries in Everett Public Schools, not just students, but all, we can see that the trend here over the next 10 years is to increase. And with that is an increase in student enrollment as well. Specifically, our most recent projections that have been presented to the board, and you will be receiving an enrollment projection update presentation in early next year. But specifically, this data is showing our 10-year enrollment projections through 2023. And as I stated earlier, all three grade levels are projected to increase between 2023 and 2033 for a total of 1,506 students over the next 10 years or so. When we look at capacity, the current status of the district is that our elementary school enrollment is over its permanent building capacity of 1,051 students. Our middle school enrollment is under its permanent building capacity by 192, and predominantly that under enrollment is within the northernmost portion of our district. Similarly too is with our high schools. Our high school enrollment is under a permanent building capacity of 558, predominantly within the northernmost part of our district. As I said, we have 143 portables total, 43 at the middle and high school levels, 100 at the elementary. And because of the need for space and for the accommodation of program within the district, given the boundaries that we currently have, we project to add 19 more portables over the next 6 years to accommodate program and increasing enrollment to about a total cost just under $6 million on portable classrooms. When we think about modernizing or replacing our aging facilities, we maintain a modernization schedule, which is a 48-year cycle. This particular list that you see here was last updated in May of 2024. It is broken into 12 phases. Those phases represent 4 years per phase. And the number of schools that you see within them are based on either the age that they were originally or the date they were originally built. You'll see the middle column is the date they were most recently modernized, if they have been modernized, and then the age at the end of this particular phase. So I will point out for you, for example, say Silver Firs Elementary School. It is in phase 2 on the very far left. It was originally built in 1988. It has not yet been modernized. And at the end of phase 2, which is 2030 in this phase, it will be 42 years old as a building. You may recall that earlier this year we presented around SCAP funds and the use of SCAP fund projects that we have done over the summer using that money. SCAP projects, buildings become eligible for SCAP funding after 30 years of age. This particular modernization schedule goes all the way to 2070. If you look at the very bottom, which is that last phase, phase 12, that phase includes the 2 most recently built schools within the district's inventory. North Middle School, which was originally built, it has a 1981 was when it was modernized actually, but it was rebuilt in 2019. And by the time we get to 2070, it will be 51 years old. I'm turning 50 this year, so I guess I have a soft spot for it. Maybe I'll be around to see it. Committee formation. The particular resolution that's presented before you tonight for our community, it would be comprised of 30 total participants. Of those participants, approximately 24 of them would be community members representing a broad cross-section of our community. It would include 2 principals or assistant principals representing both regions within the district. And it would also include 1 student representative from each of our district's 4 high schools. When we look at the committee member selection process, it's outlined here on the screen, just some brief notes of what is up here. First step is to make sure if you were to approve the resolution tonight, staff would then inform our community about the committee's charge, its opportunity to apply, and how to apply. We would offer online and in-person filling out paper forms for that, and then when the deadline would be for that. Applicants would be asked to provide some information and commit to at least 75% of the meetings that were to be scheduled. Our selections would try to create the broadest cross-section of representation within our community, not only between both regions of the district, but also a diversity of participants that represent, every type of participant we would have in our district, whether it be from different socioeconomic backgrounds, race and ethnicity backgrounds, racial ethnicity backgrounds, or also just different perspectives of parents who are connected to different aspects of school construction or bonds that would have a background that would benefit the work of the group. Those applications will be reviewed and members recommended by a selection committee. That committee has been appointed by Superintendent Saltzman. And then each board member, for your interest, may nominate up to 3 candidates to the superintendent for consideration for the committee. And the superintendent will select 1 or more of those applicants submitted by each board member. The selection committee, who will review these applications and put the committee together, includes myself, Dr. Peter Scott, and Joey Odom Grant, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, and also Darcy Walker, who's within the Capital and Facilities Planning. Similar to previous bond committees and boundary committees that we've had in the past, we have already been in contact with Jim Dugan from Parametrics, who ran our last two processes here within the district. The committee's guiding principles, there are 7 major principles within the resolution. The first is to make sure we are getting community input. That is obviously the point of a bond committee, is to get broad community input when we are putting together a bond proposal recommendation. The next is obviously we're going to be looking very deep at current enrollment projections. Those projections are coming in quite soon, the updated projections for the coming year, and we will be including those in the work of this committee. So the most accurate and pertinent information on enrollment will be included here. You will see that information again in a late winter presentation. We will also share with them a detailed view of our aging facilities. You saw the modernization schedule. The modernization schedule is just about existing buildings within our inventory. It doesn't include the need for new schools, new capacity. It also doesn't go into the details of the age of certain systems within those buildings. And so it's a deep dive when we look at item number 3 of the guiding principles. Item number 4, I'm going to have to move this. Educational programs. We will look at what our academics teams and future program needs are for our facilities. And then we'll look at our safety and security needs across the district as well, elementary, middle, and high. In a capital bond, whatever can be considered for technology would be considered within that. Not all technology replacements can be a part of a capital bond, but we would be following those parameters for what, if there is anything that would be eligible. And finally, the consideration around property taxes and tax rates. We would be considering the variables affecting future tax rates, the difficulties in predicting future tax rates, and the sensitivity of the community towards increasing tax rates as we would formulate a proposal. This particular slide is, I want to move this. It's really odd. No, a good place to put it. Okay, I'm gonna leave it right there. This particular slide is a potential slide. It has several assumptions within it, and I will point those out. This is to just show the board and our community a potential structure to the tax rate should we were to run a capital bond in 2026, and what would its impact on the existing tax rate be for our community. So several assumptions here. First of all is that this particular graph represents a bond that could go up to $500 million. It doesn't mean that's what the committee is going to develop. It just means that for the public and for our board, when we look at the way that we would be able to structure bond debt and its implications on tax rate, you can see here that in the existing years that we have, that we would still be able to be below that same tax rate that was approved in our last capital measure in 2022 of $4.08. What it shows here, if you're using the legend, it shows that the potential capital bond is the navy blue or a kind of a lighter blue at the very top. So this would be a potential future capital bond proposal that they would come up with. The orange is the existing bonds that we are paying off. The gray section here is the capital projects levy. So looking at this particular graph, we started collections of that capital levy here in 2023. That's this gray bar here. This is our existing capital levy that was passed in 2022 is the gray. What you're seeing here in 2029 assumes in this graph that we would be running a capital technology replacement levy in 2028. So we would still be able to just replace our one-to-one technology initiative through a capital levy if we were to still pass a bond in 2026 to the level of $500 million, we will still be able to keep that rate lower than 408. And starting in 2029, when the existing 2022 capital levy expires, you will actually see a drop in tax rate for this particular proposal. So while a drop in tax rate doesn't necessarily guarantee a drop in taxes, that would substantially have a positive impact on potentially what people are paying in taxes on the property taxes to go from 388 all the way down to 320. With that, this particular graph only goes through 2034. And the reason why that is structured that way is because the capital technology levy that you see here that would run for 6 years as a replacement for the one-to-one initiative would only be able to go for a maximum of 6 years. So that's why it stops there. And so with that, the capital bond timeline, what we would do if the board were to approve the resolution tonight, starting in January of 2025, the capital bond committee would be formed. We would collect those applications, review them, and notify participants as soon as possible, but no later than the end of January. The committee workshops, the first one would be in February, and they would go all the way through May. The regional community engagement participation, we would be presenting to the community as we get about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way of the committee's work. We have traditionally presented information and engaged our community at large. We would still do that in both regions 1 and 2. Somewhere also around that time, we would be coming back to the board with an update of the committee's work to date. And then in June 24th of 25, that's your last regular meeting in June, we would be coming back with the committee's recommendation for the board and the superintendent. And then in August, the board would review the superintendent's recommendation in your August workshop. And then somewhere from that time, August, September, October, the board would potentially approve that recommendation. And then the resolution is written for election, the voters to vote in February of 2026. So with that, staff requests that the board adopt resolution 1317 regarding the formation, instructions, and guiding principles for a capital bond planning committee.
Thank you. So is there any discussion or questions about the resolution before us on the formation of a committee? Yes.
Yeah, I have major concerns about voting yes on this resolution tonight if the resolution is going to include language around a specific February 2026 date. Specifically on page 2 of the resolution, it says the board anticipates the bond proposal will be placed on the February 2026 special election ballot, and I feel very uncomfortable about that.
I appreciate you catching that because I didn't catch it until just now, that when we talked about it, I wasn't sure if we were looking at really February is when we do our M&O, April, November. February does seem the right time because of the M&O. But I also wonder about during this process, getting more information about the right time. But going out twice seems ridiculous, but I wonder.
If I may interject.
Yes, please.
Recall that we are also running a replacement M&O levy in 2026. That is directly related to staff and staffing, funding staffing levels. That has strategically been run in February because of having to, if it does not pass, we would have another opportunity in April, hopefully to pass that, and still be within time for planning budget for the next year, and also to meet our timelines that we are required to meet within contracts to, should we have to reduce force. So to run it any later, an M&O levy in 2026 would not be recommended.
And every time we run a ballot, it costs us money to the county as well as time for preparation and everything, so.
Yeah, and there is great value in running two measures in 1 year,
Yeah.
obviously, at the same time.
Right.
So
the cost is-
just to give a little bit of background with that for why February is been written in.
I appreciate that. Director Herman?
The irony is, of course, running those together has a higher success rate. Doing a EP&O levy along with a bond is what they've shown. And the logic behind doing our first try in February and then using April as a backup, that I think also we've discussed, but so I'd definitely be in support of that. We can have further discussion on this, yeah.
I'm going to let Director Atkins, I see your hand, but I'll let everybody else have a speak first. So Director Mason, did I see you or Director Rovalinsky first? Director Rovalinsky? No.
Is the inclusion of the date on the resolution, is that locking us in for that?
What I would say is that we would run a M&O replacement levy in February.
Sorry,
The decision to run a bond with it is something that can be considered to not run with it. I think that's for your discussion, and I think there's, the committee itself could provide you a recommendation as part of its work about the strategic time to run the bond relative to the M&O levy or not.
So the recommendation on the timing of the bond ballot measure could be something else other than February of 26.
There are 4 opportunities a year to run a measure. So to answer your question, it would be yes.
Thank you.
I think, I'm not sure, did he answer your question? Because I think what I heard is, if we approved the resolution as is tonight, is there an opportunity to change the date on the bond if it became clear that there was a better path forward?
Yes. Well, what I would probably recommend is that no election date it would have to be amended.
Yeah, I would like to voice my opinion that running 2 school measures in 1 year is not a recipe for success. And that statistically, when we looked at the data that was presented at WASDA, the November and the February pass rates of bonds were very, very close, that there wasn't one obvious choice. So they do find that bonds pass better when they're run collectively with other measures statistically when you look at the data. So I can't understand why we would separate the 2.
You said 2 per year, that's 2 separate votes in a year versus 2 at once.
Correct, thank you, sorry.
Oh, no, I just want to make sure that.
I meant 2 separate elections,
Two separate
that would,
elections, yeah.
yeah. Going out to your community and asking once and then going back and asking again, I would have grave concerns about, especially because bonds will be, if you move it to November, it's the second measure and they need a much higher threshold to pass. So to me, they're difficult to pass to begin with. And I just don't see that would add to our success.
I kind of see this, I appreciate Dr. Rovalinsky, or Director Rovalinsky, your comment about the date, because if we charge them with ideally, or, an idea of February, new information comes to light, then, things do change. But to modify this resolution tonight does delay everything, because this is our last meeting before January, and we want to get this published, we want the work to be going, but it doesn't lock us in. It just is a guideline to the committee.
It is a guideline to the committee. That's how it is written. Awkwardly, I'm standing here. Your conversation with each other right now is the conversation you're having. I just happen to be standing here.
Yeah.
But the information that was provided in terms of pass rates and data, that things, all those were obviously discussed and considered prior to tonight's meeting and this proposal of this resolution and shared. So.
And there were several November bonds that went one passed.
I think
November.
2 out of 12 or 2 out of 14.
One of them was enormous, but that was exceptional. But yeah, it is, bonds don't pass. So working, fingers crossed. Any, Director Atkins?
Yeah, tonight, I'm not going to be convinced that a February date is the right one. I'm not saying I won't be able to be convinced, but obviously you guys have seen data that I haven't, and we don't have that data in front of us. I would feel fine passing this resolution as long as it were amended to say, instead of the board anticipates the bond proposal will be placed on the February 2026 special election ballot, if instead it said something along the lines of the board anticipates the bond proposal will be placed on a 2026 special or general election ballot.
I hear you, but just because of we're not back here to sign anything before the end of the year and running off, I think with the knowledge that two do pass better in February than separating them, because we do need that M&O. We do not need a unanimous vote on this. It is sort of nice because it is, going for that committee. So hearing resolutions or reservations, if we do go for, a vote. But I want to see what the students have to say, because this, buildings and things do impact you all.
I'm honest, I'm not very concerned because before we've always had problems and somehow we always manage to work them, and I trust you.
Dr. King, or Student Representative King.
I'd have to agree with the information you guys gathered from WASDA on the probability of a bond being passed, which was less likely against this February date, right? So I'd be in support with that. I'm all for building new schools, and I'm also in support of the plan you proposed with all the remodels and everything, so yeah.
So, yes, please.
Just,
I
have,
don't want to close discussion early. Thank you.
I have a question about the presentation, which we didn't address. We're talking about the resolution.
Thank you.
Can you provide a little more information about our high schools being 558 students under capacity? Does that include Sequoia?
That would be all of the available permanent building capacity within all 4 high schools, yes.
All 4. Okay, so Sequoia is going to play into that because we have portables at 2 high schools, which to me assumes that they are over permanent building capacity. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
Currently, right now, Cascade High School and Everett High School have permanent building capacity. Everett has more.
Yeah.
But both of them, as of this moment today, both have permanent building capacity available.
Okay, so that makes sense when you start dividing it up and including Sequoia. And then also just at some point, and not really important discussion tonight, is we need to also make clear when you showed, I was just thinking about it, when you showed the schedule of aging facilities and how old they'll be at certain points in time. I think in the community's mind, when they think about a school, they liken it to a home, which is their permanent building. And many people live in homes that are 80 and even 100 years old, those historic, beautiful homes. And it's not that they're not without maintenance and issues. But I think we need to make it very clear, schools are very different. They're used in very different ways, and they deteriorate faster because of that. And that a 50-year-old school is a very old school.
Yes, and in the modernization schedule that was presented tonight is always updated regularly. Just because, just like how I'll make an analogy to humans, human bodies all age slightly differently, right? We all don't age at the same rates and have the same problems at the same years that we all hit. Buildings are the same ways. Some of our buildings, with their design, with their amount of use, the volume of students going through, hold up a little bit longer than other buildings do. So as we every year assess our inventory and we're looking at what the needs and the repairs that are going on, that list does adjust. And sometimes something ages a lot faster than we anticipate it to, even from its remodel date. And we have to move it up on the schedule. But also, along the way, what it doesn't reflect is the maintenance of those buildings year to year to year to year to year, right? This is just showing that a substantial remodel or replacement it being necessary by that age. So it makes sure that we are always on top of what our asset management is, and that we're taking care of the public's investments regularly, and that we're not losing sight of keeping them up to date for the best possible learning experience for our kids, keeping them safe, keeping them modernized.
Yeah, and for the public to make sure that they understand that that list is highly scrutinized and there's a lot of details that go into it. It's not we built this one first and this one second kind of thing, and
yes,
and that's the order.
Yeah, and the bond planning committee will see the detail of that analysis in its meetings as it formulates a recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Director Ovalinsky.
Yeah, I just for clarification, it sounded like in a way we were Director Atkins was asking about whether the resolution can be amended. And I think you said that we cannot amend.
No, I didn't say we couldn't amend.
Oh.
I'm saying timing wise, I appreciate that. Because this is our last meeting of the year and they want to form a committee in January. And we're not back until the second week in January. So it doesn't give them the time for us to be back to sign anything. We could come in on our special time, but it's not our special time.
Okay,
Other
so,
time to sign.
okay, so sorry. So what we're saying is we can amend, but what we don't have time to do is like reprint it and stuff.
Reprint, sign it, yeah.
Okay.
And get it so it can get published and out there. I mean, I presume, but we're just voting on a resolution. We're not, the date and everything is not, it's the formation of the committee, and we'd like the district to be able to go and do that committee work. And that's what this resolution
Got
is
it.
for.
Thank you.
That's really the purpose of the resolution.
Got it.
Director Atkins, yes.
Yeah, I'm very just discouraged and disappointed that the specific election date was included in this resolution without talking further with this group about whether or not that was something we all agreed with. But to that end, I'll move, and I would like to move and amend Resolution 1317, striking the segment under committee instructions, Section 2. The board anticipates the bond proposal will be placed on the February 2026 special election ballot. And we can just cross that whole sentence off when we sign it tonight.
I'm not going to agree with that, so I'm going to let that go. Director Herman, did you have another comment?
Not at this time. I think we're waiting for a second, though.
Well, I'll second it. I guess what I struggle with is, the sausage making of why we can't do that, And I personally think that it is really early to like kind of make that declaration that time is it. I mean, we could have fires, who knows what happens between now and then. I kind of like keeping it open. We can make that decision later, can't we?
But I don't know if, the resolution, what I heard is there's a date in there that gives them a goal, but it's not locking us into a date. It's not telling us we will put out a vote on that date.
President Mitchell, Dr. Saltzman,
please.
if I may, the wording specifically says anticipates. The anticipation was a very specific word chosen, and I'll give some background on to why. Because in light of the EP&O levy replacement, we know that we have a timeline that we need to run that. So the word anticipation was reflective of that. It does not, although there's a lot of data and a lot of evidence to support running the two measures together and running it at that time, it is not a shall, right? So just to give a little bit of nuance to that, the bond planning committee will come up with a recommendation. It will come up with information for the superintendent to share with the board for your consideration. There is a part of that process to adjust whatever that recommendation is. Of course, we want to honor the great work of our committee, our representatives from our community, to provide that work to the superintendent for the board. But there is the possibility of adjustment of that proposal, and that consideration is typically what is occurring, from its presentation in June to your August retreat.
Is there any other discussion or questions? Yeah, Director Student Representative King.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's not like a locked-in date and it's an anticipation that the committee is like not required but encouraged and urged to meet. I'm in support of keeping it how it is.
I have another question.
Please.
Vice President. Will the committee, is the plan, although it's probably not real baked yet in terms of all the meetings and everything, but will they be presented with election data?
Yes.
So with that, I do feel like including a very, I mean, I feel pretty, I have concerns about running two measures in 1 year on different dates. But with that said, we're handing over so much authority to the committee to help us develop this proposal that I think the date could be part of it as well. I think that including it in the resolution tonight does lead them to down a path. And perhaps if they see the data that we saw at WASDA, they would be more convinced to help decide a specific date.
And I think the bond committee in its recommendation can clearly define not only its recommended election date, but its reasons why to the board in our report.
I also believe that just because logistics were late in the year and we can't, I think we could all get a signature on something if we needed to by the end of next Friday. We have other events that will be participating here at CRC, and if there is a reason that a director could not do that, they should probably speak now, but I would say that probably wouldn't be a difficult thing. It shouldn't be a reason to not make an important decision, I guess.
No, I appreciate that. Okay, so we have a motion in front of us to amend the resolution, removing the line about the date. So is there we'll take a vote on that, barring any other conversation? Yes.
So I have a point of logistic here. So if we agree that the committee should help us decide on the date, but we don't agree with the amendment as proposed, what is the path forward?
I just looked it up, so I'm taking a vote on the amendment. And so if everybody agrees with the resolution with the amendment, and if that goes up, then that's how it gets approved. If it goes down, then it'll be a resolution on the, asking for a motion on the resolution as written.
Okay.
So this is a vote on the amendment.
So if this vote fails, we start a new vote with the unamended resolution. Got it.
Unless there's another amendment.
Create another.
Okay,
Go ahead.
fair enough.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, okay, so then, so we've had a motion and it's been seconded to amend the resolution, removing the line about the date for the levy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no?
No.
So the noes carry. So now we will move to, are there any other motions?
I would like to propose a motion that we amend the language on the specific date to be more generic, that it would be one of the charges of the committee. And I'm not going to give you any specific language, but other than not a specific date.
So that, thank you. Okay, so is there a second?
Second.
Second, so that what I'm hearing is based on the evidence that we saw, based on the evidence that's out there, we're not charging them with a date, but we're saying we want you to help us pick a date.
Something like that.
Point of clarification, that the year is 2026.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yes, the best, you can wordsmith it, we won't. So is there any further discussion on modifying the line in the resolution to saying a date to be determined in 2026? For discussion, students? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Abstain? Okay, so the ayes have it to a change in that line, and all of us will commit to come in when we're told when it's available, when we can sign it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just
Yes.
one last final note. not, it's 6:45 on Tuesday night. I know we're all going to be here, or many of us will be here tomorrow at noon, possibly.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if that's too much pressure, but there might be an opportunity there to grab most of the directors.
Whoever's here, there'll be time.
Can't promise you noon.
I know. I'm
I-
just throwing it
yeah.
out there. There's no promises. I just,
Right, I do, first of all, thank you for the consensus tonight, but I do promise you that we'll get on this at the best of our ability. I promise you that.
Okay, yes, yes.
Final, I just want to say a big thank you for keeping us on track on our facilities. This is such a long-term project, and taking care of our current facilities and also building for the future. There's a lot of information for any public that perhaps are watching tonight. A lot of information on the facilities page on the district website, enrollment projections, how that works, the capital facilities plan, which is updated every 2 years. And so just a big thank you, because we need to keep moving on this to stay on top of it, because we can fall behind very, very easily if we don't. So thank you.
And just one more point that the public should hear, and Director Mason said it too. When a house is 100 years old, that's one thing, but schools never close, really. There's night activities in every one of our schools right now being used. And I think people have to realize that. So schools are of a different, usage. And I think we tend not to mention that enough in all our communities.
can I say one last thing?
Yes, yes.
Sorry. I just want to note also for the public that, in our state, and statistics prove this, bonds are very difficult to pass. And we've worked very hard to get that changed. To date, it has not. So we are stuck with a 60% approval rate. We have bailed bonds at 58.8%. It's a real injustice that our state continues to hold on to. And there are going to be community members out there that say we probably won't pass a bond just because they are so difficult. But it is our charge sitting up here to ensure that we have modernized, up-to-date facilities, and we have to try. And I hope we can bring our community along with us.
Well, thank you. Anybody want to top that? Okay, well, thank you. I thought that was wonderful. Closure for that discussion. Thank you, Director Mason. Next, we're moving on to,
We haven't voted on the underlying motion. We voted on the amendment, but not on the motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you. I'm getting nods. Thank you. So
Good catch.
this one I'm going to do just a little bit differently because we've all in agreement, but is there any objection to the resolution 1317 being adopted by general consent?
As amended.
As amended. Are there any objections? Seeing none, then the resolution as amended will be adopted by general consent. Thank you for the nods. Thank you for the clarification. Now, Director Fleckenstein, you have policy 3300, student discipline, where you are asking for first and second adoption tonight due to law changes.
Yes, thank you. Tonight, policy 3300, student discipline. At the beginning of the school year, OSPI issued emergency rules to this particular student discipline policy. And so while the laws haven't permanently changed, the rules, remember, which are governed by OSPI as the governing body, is now charged to then make revisions throughout this year, which we anticipate will be implemented for the 25-26 school year. Specifically, the language that's contained within the policy itself, but primarily within its procedure, eliminates what was previously used terms as other forms of discipline being considered in what would be exclusionary discipline of a serious nature, short-term suspensions and things. So while we still adhere to a continuum of practices that are trying to keep students from being excluded, there are situations that under these emergency rules say if there is an emergency, if there is a safety or health risk or that's occurring in the classroom that needs an immediate resolve by removing a student or students, that we no longer have to consider what was termed as other forms of discipline first. To maintain safety, we can just remove the student. So it's deleted in practicality other forms of discipline, has not changed in any other way, that we are using best practices to teach students' behaviors, very much like our PBIS and MTSS work here within the district rulers, an example of that the superintendent presented tonight. It does not change, but actually just further detail clarifies, here's what's on this, the page, about our collection of student discipline data, and that we are to collect it in a manner that allows it to be disaggregated down to a much more granular level to identify trends of discipline, so we are no longer, we start to eliminate disparity or disproportionality within student discipline within the district. So that has not changed. The charge is still there. It's just much more well spelled out about how granular we are going to disaggregate that data moving forward. And with that, what I ask the board is to, because this is an emergency set of rules from OSPI, that we do adopt policy 3300 student discipline upon first reading this evening.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? So seeing none, this is a time, because this is a student policy. Do we have an advisory vote from Student Representative Covarrubias? So yes, Student Representative King? Okay, so is there any objection to the policy being adopted for both first and second reading by general consent? Seeing none, the policy is approved and adopted by general consent. Thank you, Mr. Fleckenstein. That moves us on to section 17.0, upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman, what are you planning?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and the public this evening. At the December 12th special meeting, the board will attend the Everett Public Schools Community Leaders presentation. At the January 11th special meeting, the board will attend the WASDA-WASBO Legislative Conference. At the January 14th regular meeting, the board agenda will contain the following: a recognition for the secondary compositing video winners, a recognition of the Washington State Museum Art Educator of the Year, the November financial report, the OSPI Consolidated Equity Sustainability Grant, preview of the Strategic Initiative work sessions, and an instructional review summary. Thank you, Madam Chair and the board.
Thank you. That moves us to section 18.0, executive or closed session. There is none for this meeting, which takes us to section 19.0, or adjournment. This concludes the December 10th, 2024 regular meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. The meeting is now adjourned. Happy holidays.